I remember stories from when I was younger. Tales of when the Empire grew vengeful and hunted the clans to the point of extinction. There were masters of deception, spies without equal, warriors of extraordinary ability. This is the legend of a brave few who fought to change the course of history and end the time of woe and terror. Our story begins at the Wooden Dojo.
Hi, this is John, the DMGM for the Wooden Dojo, and I just want to say thank you so much for coming back, and we're doing a very quick little impromptu episode. For the moment, if you haven't heard, we're going on a very short hiatus. We had some family issues that came up. If you're part of our Instagram group or Twitter or Facebook, you know that one of our members, Bobby, passed away this last month or so, and members of our group are basically having to take care of family issues and arrange things and take care of a few things. And so we really appreciate y'all's patience and understanding while all this is going on. But we are going to go ahead and release this, which is actually a question and answer episode. Back in December, we announced that we were going to do a question and answer episode. And we got some responses from listeners, other podcasters, and even our players. And so I decided to go ahead and put this together really quick as just something to, do a little filler and keep some content coming out for you. Know that, yeah, we are still here and we are going to continue this story. Honestly, my goal is that this will be a very long campaign. But before we get into that, I also want to be sure to thank, so this going down a list here in no particular order, I want to be sure that I thank Kevin Long, Swayjar, Kay Kaysen, Phil Parrish, Tabitha Lansing, Jesse W. Jackson, Dorkistan, John Miserable, and Matt Quiet. And I just want to thank all of you for taking the time to do some reviews for us and subscribe to our podcast, as well as recently subscribing to our YouTube channel. And so thank you all very, very much for doing that for us. So without further ado, here's some of the questions that we got for our Q&A request. I asked for these, and I'm going to go ahead and answer a couple of these this time around. And I arranged them a little bit to make some sense out of them, so, just try and follow along. So first off, Matt Quiet from the Nerds Domain asked why we chose the Ninja Crusade 2nd edition for an actual play podcast. Well, first off, I would have to say that I am a huge fan of Eloy Lasanta and his team at Third Eye Games. He's in my top 5 current era RPG creators. I don't want to say idolize him, but I call him my gaming senpais, essentially. And that is, so, Eloy, Ivan Van Norman, Crystal Fraser, Chris Promise, and Mark Truman. They are all the people that I really look up to, and I get excited when I hear about stuff they're doing in the gaming industry. It's like, yeah, I kind of fangirl out with that one. And hey, it is what it is. That's one of the reasons, is I'm just a really huge fan of theirs. Second, I love the system. It's more cinematic than a crunchy battle mechanic game. It brings the players into the story, giving them a voice, which I think makes it perfect for podcasting. I would also say that the podcasting actual play community has just exploded. I think there's a website, it's rpgcast.com, has a listing of over 200 actual plays. And at the end of 2018, on a completely separate list, and I think it's like Podomatic or something like that, lists that there are now thousands, thousands of RPG-adjacent podcasts. So that's going to be actual plays, creations, review shows, just about everything you can imagine that is like an RPG-related topic. We're now in the era of thousands of podcasts, and that just blows my mind. So I wanted to stand out. I wanted to do something and not just be another, D&D actual play campaign. I wanted it to be something people really might not know about. I wanted to do something that was kind of pioneering, and we are the first of our kind. which is really cool when I think about it. Also, another podcast wrote us, and it's our pals over at the Kevin Long Show, wrote and asked us, how does Ninja Crusade stack up against Legends of the Five Rings, the current reigning Asian fiction RPG world, originally by AG, and now with Fantasy Flight Games? And would a knowledge of it aid players with the Ninja Crusade? So, mechanic-wise, I'm going to start off there. I'll go into the other sides of this as well. But mechanic-wise, L5R used to use what was called a roll and keep system with D10s. But now it uses the Fantasy Flight system that they use with the Star Wars lines and Genesis. So, I mean, if you're playing the current iteration of that game, it's very different system-wise. But if you used to play the old D10 version, there are similarities. Because Ninja Crusade uses D10s, but rather than being a roll and keep system where you add skills and stats together to create a dice pool and then generate a number, based off of rolling all your dice, in Ninja Crusade, you're rolling your dice. 7, 8s, 9s are successes, and 10s are 2 successes. So you're gaining your successes that way, and that's how your chance is taken care of in this role-playing game. It's a similar style if you ever played the old White Wolf system, but it adds other interesting mechanics. And so I think mechanic-wise, there's similarities, and it would be easy if you've left like the D20 world out there. All the different games that use a D20 system, which is not just Pathfinder and D&D. Also, Palladium's old games used a D20 for any of their not their skill checks, but a lot of their other checks. World-wise, it is based on Asian and Eastern themes, much like L5R. L5R obviously focuses it's kind of weird because they both do the same thing. While L5R, like from a government level, really focuses on like understanding Japanese government and the era of samurai. In fact, L5R focuses specifically on court drama, samurai, and spellcasters. It really takes on the, if you've ever read any of the Hokkaido Road novels, which are kind of rare, I guess, in English, and not many people read them. A lot of times there is a lot of, they're like historical fiction is the best way to put it, because the time and the era is pretty true to life, what it was like, but the people in those books didn't exist. But so L5R really follows that. Now, Legend of the Five Rings, it's always shortened to L5R for me. But with Ninja Crusade, there are no samurai. That's not a part of this world. This world is much more, ties itself to anime and a fiction that has a lot of allusion to Asian cultures, which L5R does too. L5R runs the gambit with the Unicorn Clan being much closer to the Huns, and samurai clans such as the Crane or the Lion being much closer to the ideal of what we think a samurai is from a Western point of view. I definitely want to point that out, is that L5R is definitely, it's based on that with a great deal of adoration and love for the world that is presented, but it is very much the romanticized view of a Western culture looking at it. So, which, take it or leave it. Some people like that, some people don't. But anyway, I think that expanding your horizon, role-playing wise, is always good. So L5R and Ninja Crusade are beyond the standard ken of fantasy role-playing, and if you're just trying to get better at role-playing, you want to add more titles to your belt. And I think both of those are great titles. Anyway, so now we are headed on to a different Kevin, who writes and asks, did I base the plot of the game off of anything in particular? So I guess most storytellers in games take inspiration where they can get it. Setting-wise, I definitely borrowed, for my vision of it, from anime such as Naruto, as well as Basilisk. I also had some influence from Avatar: The Last Airbender in the way I saw things. Then some scenes are allusions to various Asian cinema moments, like the duel that's in the series, like the duel that is taking place in the capital city in my game that I'm running is a direct allusion to the movie called The Duel, starring Andy Lau and Eking Cheng. And amazing movie. It is serious to some extent. It's very much a wire-fu movie, but at the same time, it is wonderful, and there's some great comedic moments in it. The main character is not actually in the duel at all, but is a government agent, and he is hilarious. I love that movie, and so including that in there was kind of, paying tribute to that. The way I describe the tavern at Arata Ryokan is very scantily based off a mixture of a tavern and Rurouni Kenshin and a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So as far as like the aesthetic and the way that I described it, I based off those things. As far as the game goes, in particular, those are my inspirations. I love Asian cinema. I love anime in all its forms. I really enjoy the classic wushu theater kind of stuff. And I really do like, I actually love Korean movies as well. And so each one of them has a different feel and a different cultural aspect that this gives me a rich background to pull different things from into this world. And if you know more about the world itself and Aloy and people that he interviewed and went to talk to, there is a whole blending of cultures within this game. But, look into that. I would recommend looking into his various books out there. The Land of Seed and Blossom is a great book, expanding on the world of the Ninja Crusade with a whole nother section of the continent and dedicated to other cultures beyond just like the allusion to Japan. Getting kind of excited, and I love talking about this. Anyway, moving on. So Christy writes and asks, what would I say is the basis for my campaign for Ninja Crusade? Well, if you've played Ninja Crusade before, or just listening to the show, you know that this is a underdog tale. It's a war between rebels and an emperor. It's a very classic motif. So initially for the series of books by Third Eye, you get this feeling that the Empire will stop at nothing to wipe out the ninja, and you get kind of this opinion or this idea that they're fairly evil to go to the nth degree to wipe out the ninja. It's the underdog tale. Here's this great empire wiping out, and for a while they're incredibly successful. There are said to be ninja clans that are entirely lost. The Pack of the Black Moon lost their headquarters. There's a great amount of suffering that has happened in this world. So there's that. And then you enter in the Emperor's Reign book, and you feel that the Emperor, who is faced with war that seems almost unwinnable, is driven by that loss and sadness. And honestly, you get the feeling that the Ninja Crusade would never have started if ninja hadn't been willing to use their abilities to commit crimes on behalf of the highest bidder. And that is, it's that thing where in the real world, there's never a good guy or a bad guy. There's always kind of this whole kind of gray that everybody falls into, and everybody thinks they're right. So there's all that going on in the way that the game presents itself, and that is a rich environment to play anything in, honestly. But when I was going to set up for this actual play, I was like, okay, what would happen if the people in the Empire, like the common citizenry, had enough and recognized that both the ninja and the Emperor were a problem? What if the nation was sick of being used and torn apart by the two factions? And this is actually the overarching plot that I'm dropping my players into, and they're starting to get a part of. In fact, if you've listened to the prequel series that was on the podcast, Seriously Let's Play, it is very blatant that that is what I'm trying to do. And this game kind of closes up everything a little bit, and it's a new group of ninja who are having to understand that they are being dropped into a people's revolution, if you will. And now the question is, who is going to survive this impending conflict? Are the people going to survive? Will the Empire survive? Will even the ninjas survive? Because at this point in our series, they're not exactly aligned with the factions that are now coming up trying to overthrow the Empire. That's the basis of my campaign. Sarah writes and asks, and this one's a pretty deep one, am I at all worried about cultural appropriation with this show? Of course I am, and I have been from the start, honestly. When the game first came out, there's actually an interview, or there was an interview. I don't know if it's out there anymore. Aloy might still have it, but it was on YouTube and it was part of another channel. I did this interview with him where I talked about that. I was like, so you got this game that addresses Asian cultures and, especially with the role-playing community and the way it reacts. Where do you feel about cultural appropriation with this? And one of the things that Aloy told me about was that during the writing and creation of this game, and the writing team specifically teamed up and discussed the setting of this game with members of the various cultures who are represented in this book, so that they can, while this game is a work of fiction, it is still respectful in tone and ways that reference the various Far Eastern nations and cultures of our real world. The idea is like, think of Avatar: The Last Airbender by Nickelodeon here in America. It is incredibly respectful and fictional. It is based on our world, but it is a completely different idea. And I think that that's what Aloy and Third Eye Games were trying to do in Ninja Crusade with what they put out. And likewise, when we began this actual play, I wanted to kind of maintain that idea. And so I set out very specific rules with our players. Rules like no Asian accents. We're not going to mock another culture. Even if you think you do a great Asian accent, it's not yours. That is not your accent. And at the same time, a lot of times that accent has been used to mock people in history and in cinema. Jerry Lewis, prime example. It was used for mocking and making fun of people. I mean, even Victor Borge, who is a famous comedian of a different era, still had a skit that made fun of Asian people. Yeah, I said no Asian accents. I also told my players that no browbeating. I didn't want anybody trying to flex their knowledge muscle on Asian culture with this game. I don't want long-winded explanations, and I don't want people using words or things from another culture unless, and here's the basis. This was the line that I drew was that you could not use native words from a language unless they were thematically relevant or there was no English word that could be substituted. So a hotel is a hotel, a bath is a bath, a field is a field. All these things. We're not going to start calling things by another title. If there is something in the book, in Ninja Crusade, that it is called this specifically, that we will stick to that wording. That was one of my things. We'll use how it described it. If there's things that there is no English equivalent, such as Zen. There is no English equivalent. Like sake. Those are things that, while there are equivalents of, they are thematically correct for what we're trying to run. And that's one of the things I want to do. My goal was to be culturally appreciative and respectful. And yeah, I hope we're doing it so far. I really feel like we are. Moving on. We got another question, and it was, seriously, like, what is Rin? So if you don't know, if you haven't listened to our show before, and you're coming in on this episode, I hope you stick around or go back and listen to the originals. Rin, honestly, is an expression of myself within the game. Kind of a way for me to be in the game, yet not be in the game. I've always loved portions of Bishonen culture of Japan and the famous cultural figures who blurred the lines of gender, such as portrayals of Okita Soji or Hajime Saito from the Shinsengumi, the Hakuoki video game series, even Ukyo Tachibana in Samurai Showdown, Shun Kisaragi from the anime Here is Greenwood, Ritsu Soma from Fruits Baskets, and if you want a real-world modern example, Mana from the Japanese rock band Malice Miser, as well as stories and folklore in Asian nations where gender lines are blurred. Those were my inspirations, and that is an expression of myself. I don't really observe gender the way most people do. I don't want to say that I am a gender or anything like that, or gender neutral. That's not how I am myself. I do consider myself, I use masculine pronouns and whatever else, but I really see a lot of the way that we look at gender as societal and cultural, and that these are things that we enforce but don't always hold true. And so Ren is my expression on that of myself. So And the best way, if you're looking at the character of Ren, the best way to understand Ren is that they are Ren. I've tried to portray them as a joyful, smiling NPC who, by definition, is undefinable, which is their core strength as a ninja. So, Rin likes to leave everyone guessing, and that's how Rin would answer this question themselves. Continuing, and I think this is actually my last question. We didn't get a whole lot of questions, but boy, I can ramble on about all this. So, Phil writes and says, will the game ever return to the other team? And I think it will. I think it will, and I've actually got plans for it too, and I've got plots that I've got written out. Third Eye Games really create an in-depth world for me to play with, where everything isn't really, cut and dry, and there's a lot happening behind the scenes that even my players, who have not fully read the books, are just, kind of taking it all in at the table, which I think is great for the actual play. I'm loving that they're learning the game at the same time the listeners are learning the game. There's that, but at the same time, like when I started this game, I honestly was partially influenced by Jackson Lansing's vast actual play. I thought it was brilliant for him to have two separate crews and two separate shows addressing different parts of an overarching plot, because it made the world, or his universe for him, seem even bigger than anything I've had first seen in actual play before. And this blew my mind. I loved it. And I kind of want to do something along those lines. But as a podcast, I mean, a lot of the nuance would be lost, because you're tuning in the same podcast. Well, you were tuning into the same show with Jackson, but each one was thematically different, where it was, different teams, different players, and a lot of that would be lost on the podcast if you can't really tell the voices apart. If you haven't been keeping up on the plot, or all of a sudden maybe you were preferring one plot over another, it'd be one of those things where you might just skip episodes. And I was like, no, it's one of those things where this is kind of what I want to do. And yes, I do plan on bringing back the original team, but how I'm going to work it in is still going to be figured out. Those are the questions that we got for our first Q&A episode write-up. I want to thank everybody who sent those in, the other podcasts that wrote in. Honestly, I'll go ahead and list them off as well. We had Nerds Domain submitted questions for us. We had the Kevin Long Show submit questions for us. We had Capes and Lunatics submit questions for us. So I just want to say thank you guys so much, and I really look forward to doing another one of these again. So I think this was kind of fun. So take care, guys, and we will see you in the month of February with brand new episodes of the Wooden Dojo.